Got it. Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Auburn Avenue Research Library. My name is Tamika Strong. I am the Reference and Research Division Manager. I get those terms confused because I just joined the team in July, so I'm still learning. But I want to welcome you to the third and final day of our 3-day conference, Collecting, Researching, and Writing While Black. And so today we have a treat for you because we have this fabulous panel of genealogists who are going to discuss the future of exploring our past, a discussion of Black genealogy. Today we have, as our moderator, Tammy Ozier, who is the immediate past president of the Metro Atlanta chapter of OGS, which is the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society. We also have Stephenson, who is the former national president of OGS. We have Rhonda Barrow, the researcher. One of her many projects is the 1906 Atlanta Race Massacre. And we have Tamu who's the current president of the Metro Atlanta chapter of OGS. So I'm going to read their bios, and once I complete reading their bios, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator. Tammy Ozier, a family historian for over 25 years, has traced her enslaved and free ancestors back to the mid-1700s. Tammy presents at local and national forums, conducts family history research through Ancestral Pathways, LLC, and supports community research by exploring descendancy connections. A lifetime member and immediate past president of OGS Metro Atlanta chapter, Tammy also holds memberships in various genealogical and historical societies, including the Sons and Daughters of the United States Middle Passage. Rhonda Barrow began her quest to find her family history many years ago with a simple question: how are they related to me? Since then, she has been researching family and social histories in the Caribbean and the United States. Ms. Barrow has worked on several research projects, including identifying descendants of enslaved individuals through the Bailey Camp Project, researching family members affected by the Leo Frank case, and locating descendants of the individuals affected by the Atlanta Race Massacre, which resulted in her receiving the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society, Incorporated National Certificate of Appreciation Award for her work. Stephenson has been researching family history for several decades. An avid researcher, writer, lecturer, poet, and collector of Africans and American memorabilia, he has served as a member of the executive board of the Afro-American Historical Genealogical Society for many years, most recently as immediate past president. He has also served as president of Metro Atlanta chapter of OGS. I don't know if you guys have noticed that there's a theme here called OGS. So you're going to learn about OGS. If you learn anything else, you're going to know about OGS. And last but not least, the current president of OGS is Ms. Tamu. She is also the current recording secretary of the national organization of OGS. She has over 30 years experience researching her family and using various methods and tools to discover new information about her ancestors. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Ms. Tammy Ozier.
Thank you, Tamika. Can you guys hear me okay? I am so excited to be here with my colleagues and to talk about genealogy. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So today, our focus is really talking about digitalization. What is the future for genealogy? And we're going to get, for all the questions, I would like all of the panelists to actually answer all the questions. And you also will have an opportunity to ask the panelists questions after we finish our discussion. So let's go ahead and get started. Our first question, and doesn't matter who starts, but I just want everyone to answer. Before we actually get started, I would like to give each of you an opportunity, 1 minute just to kind of introduce. I know we talked about your bios, but this may be 1 minute just to say something about yourself. Maybe a research project you're working on, or give the audience something so they can know you better.
Okay, my name is Rhonda Barrow. I guess something not mentioned in my bio, I worked on a project of discovering the first African-American Girl Scout troops here in Atlanta, which resulted in the mural that's down the street on the Atlanta Daily World building.
Thank you. That's great. Tamu?
I'm Tamu Taylor. One thing about me, I'm like a dog with a bone with some research, so I get stuck sometimes, which is why it's been like so many years. But one of my major research issues right now is my paternal grandfather. Interesting story. He pretty much changed his name for 30 years, served in the U.S. Army. I knew him as one person, but he was actually another person. So that's the rabbit hole that I've been going down for the past few years. Also, I try to get my family involved in genealogy a lot. My husband always says, "Oh, you talking about them dead people again." So, but little does he know, he has a very interesting genealogy. So I love it, and it's a favorite pastime of mine.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Well, my name, of course, is Baba. I'm Baba Jean. And I don't have anything that's too outstanding, except that many years ago, along with Rhonda Barrow, I was very active here at the Auburn Avenue Research Library and formulating Friends of the Auburn Avenue Research Library. And so my suggestion or recommendation is from what you take today, it may be for you here the beginning of your journey in genealogy. I would suggest and recommend very highly that you utilize the archives here in the library.
Thank you. Thank all of you. So for our first question, can you share with the audience your thoughts on the impact of digitalization and what it has on your genealogy and your research experience? Barbara Jean, let's start with you.
We designated
I'm sorry. Got it.
And I honor what he says because he's the past president. So what he says, I'll do. So for me personally, from the days of in those dark archives and libraries looking in that microfilm, digitization is a game changer in genealogy. It helps, especially during like COVID, or if you just can't make it to a repository, if you can't make it to the county courthouse, or if you can't make it to the National Archives, most of those records you can find online. Now you still have to go physically to these places, but when you're first starting out, at least you got the census records available to you, and you can sit there and scroll all day long. You don't have to necessarily have an Ancestry subscription. You can go to the library and use the library subscription and get yourself started. So for me, digitization helps a lot, from maps to books that's online about certain areas that I'm researching, other records that I never dreamed that were there that could help me with my research. And it gives you a jumping off point before you go out and do physical research somewhere. So for me, it's been a game changer.
Rhonda?
I agree with Tamu. For myself, my research is in the Caribbean, so it would be quite expensive for me to make runs to different islands trying to obtain information. I will say that it's a great thing, but it does have setbacks because you cannot 100% rely on it. Someone who scanned something may have missed 2 or 3 pages. So you think your relative is gone. They're not gone. They're just not in that digitized record. So you would want to still go to the sources if you can to make sure that there isn't a missing page. And then the other thing is, for new genealogists, it's not the only way. You have to touch and you have to sneeze from dust, or you're not officially a genealogist.
I agree with that. Barbara Jean?
Okay, I'm going to do something a little different, and I hope you'll be patient with me. Rather than to be extemporaneous, I've prepared some comments that I think might be of significance. digitization has had a profound impact on the field of genealogy, reshaping how individuals research their family history. The ongoing digitization of records, archives, and resources has dramatically transformed both the accessibility and methods of genealogical research. Here are some of the key ways digitization is affecting genealogy research today. Increased accessibility, global records, online databases, and historical newspapers. Improved searchability, searchable databases. With digitalization, many records are indexed and searchable by name, date, location, and other criteria, drastically reducing the time it would have taken to shift through, as mentioned, paper records. The ability to quickly research and filter records is a game changer for genealogists. For those of you who've not had that journey with what has been mentioned earlier, it will save you tremendous time, money, and effort. Digitization has just totally revolutionized the way in which we do our research. As Tamu said, going through those reels hour after hour, going back because you think you missed something, you know it's there. The digitization, that time is cut down to just basically seconds. Preservation and conservation, protecting fragile records. Digitization has removed that experience that Rhonda mentioned where you may sneeze because you're using old records or records that for 150 years just been sitting dormant in an archive for a courthouse. Collaborative research, family trees and DNA. Organizations such as 23andMe, Ancestry DNA, African Ancestry, and others enable individuals to connect with distant relatives and expand their research through shared genetic data.
So, Bible, for the DNA, let's talk. That's actually part of the next question. Okay. Do you want to continue on the first part of the question, or you want to move to the second question that I'm going to ask now?
First part.
Okay.
I wanted to mention something that Rhonda said, privacy and security. A lot of folks are a little less concerned about, or more concerned, I should say, about their records being digitized, which is somewhat leading into the DNA thing around privatization. As genealogical data becomes more widely available online, there are increasing concerns about privacy, especially when it comes to living relatives. Going to DNA testing in particular raises questions about how genetic data is stored and shared, whether it might be accessed by third parties without consent.
Okay. Those are some excellent points, and I really appreciate all of the things that you guys have said. One thing that I want to just emphasize of what you all said was access, because I think one of the things when we start talking, because we're talking about the future of genealogy and access. Each of you talked about having access to the records, and one of the things, Rhonda, you mentioned, and you guys were talking about. I had a recent experience where I actually went to an archive to get a record, and they couldn't find the record, and the record was actually misfiled, and they had, copied the originals, and it was supposed to be in a place. These are digital records, but it was actually digitized incorrectly. So I would say is not only access, but it's persistence. You have to make sure if it's a record that you know should be there, be persistent with the organization, the archive that you're working with. I just want to add my little tidbit there because it's important. It's important. So our next question is, DNA is now a part of the genealogical toolbox. How has the expansion of DNA and its tools, what has it had on your research? What impact has it had on your research journey?
Am I still going first? For me, again, it's opened up a huge door for me, and I'm sure for any genealogist. Not only has it connected dots, broken down some brick walls, connecting me to cousins I didn't know about who also enhanced my research. It's very valuable in a genealogical journey. I understand people are concerned about privacy, about their DNA, the ethics around DNA, and that's a real concern. But as a genealogist, I recommend everybody get their DNA, because we may be cousins. We may be able to find something on our trees, but seriously, DNA, because anybody can get your DNA. You could be at a restaurant, and if somebody wanted your DNA, they got it. So, it's a bird in one hand beats two in the bush kind of thing. But for me in genealogy, like I said, I've connected with cousins. It has helped me further my research. It has helped me look in places that I didn't even think about looking based on a match that I may have found, and looking at their tree and finding out about people, whether they're directly related to me, or like an aunt or a cousin who could bring me back to what I'm trying to research. So don't discount DNA in your research. It's very valuable, and encourage others to take their test as well.
For me, I'm gonna call myself a newbie in DNA. I did the test, and I simply did the test because I wanted to know what I was made of. There was always that story that there was a Caucasian person in the family, and it's like, oh, yeah, okay. So there was. So I'm 23% Irish. So to find these facts out, I had a colleague say to me once, "That's why you're always cold." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Because Irish people are cold all the time, and I used to have like tints of red hair, so it just put everything up front for me to understand my family better." But I think the best thing that has happened to me in doing the DNA, there was a result, and the person contacted my cousin in Barbados, who decided that I used to be the crazy in the family, but now I have a title. I'm the family historian. So they attached me to my match as the family historian. So speaking with the individual, she knew nothing about the family. Her mother was adopted, and she had always wanted to meet family, okay? So we did get in touch, and I'm not gonna get upset. On her 88th birthday, for the first time, she had family members that she didn't know contact her and wish her happy birthday. So to me, if nothing else, you do nothing else. Go find that family member who doesn't know anything about you and the rest of the family, and connect.
Okay, the theme here is relatives. DNA, the discussion around DNA, generally speaking, you hear about it in the news. But one of the major connections as a result of having your DNA done is the discovery of hidden relatives. There are many. First cousins that you don't know about, second, third, fourth, fifth cousins from the great-great-great-grandparent. The thing about DNA is you are more connected than you are disconnected. And many of us, because we haven't taken advantage of DNA as a means in which to trace our history or family lineage, we sometimes possibly on a train, in an airplane, anywhere, walk past a cousin or two in a lifetime, or maybe three. And so having your DNA as a tool to not only connect yourself to your family tree on paper, but having an opportunity to talk to someone who may be 88 years old, or in my instance, I'm 74. So I am meeting relatives for the first time, and it's an emotional journey. So you, as most of you are younger, so as you embrace this process of DNA, you have a chance to allow yourself to experience what it can mean not only for you, but for that other person who may not have a clue, who's just simply doing their family tree. They may not have a historical interest in, African history, et cetera. But to have someone out of the blue call you, send you an email saying we might be related is an experience that you just can't, you just don't know. It is uplifting. It's an opportunity to really embrace your essence. I'm like, Rhonda, you can get emotional about it because it's a spiritual experience as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in here also. DNA, I think, is important, and I think as people of African descent, one of the things that people who were enslaved, we were separated. Our families were, taken apart. But not just during slavery, even after slavery, there were experiences where we were disconnected, and DNA is a way for us to be connected. I have a short story where when I was doing my genealogy, my paternal great-grandmother, one of my paternal great-grandmothers had two brothers that disappeared. One name was Prosper, the other, his name was Victor. And they just disappeared. I couldn't find them in the records. DNA actually connected me to their descendants. And they actually, I'm from Louisiana, and they left Louisiana never to return. One, Victor, changed his name to Hector and moved to Oklahoma. And the other one left Louisiana and went to Tennessee. Changed his name. He started using his middle name, which was Edward, and changed the last name. So that's just a small example of how families can be reconnected, and we have proof because DNA was able to, bring that family back together. Of course.
So I just had this thought. So after slavery, people trying to find their family, they would put ads in this section of the newspaper called Information Wanted. So I'm looking for my sister. She was last here. So I just had this crazy thing spin in my head that DNA actually is the modern information wanted.
That's powerful. Yeah.
Does
That's
that make
powerful.
sense?
It makes sense. Yeah.
So that it just popped in my head. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, one of the other aspects of DNA is that since we're discussing DNA, digitization, et cetera, it's global, which means there are other opportunities for connecting with relatives. Give you an example. The transatlantic voyage or slave trade, there are records in the archives of Voyage, Manifests, the earlier ones, do have names, port locations, places on the continent where this one, that one, the other one actually hail from. So having DNA as a global tool with others also on the continent, in the islands, in South America, etc., doing the same thing that we're doing today is an opportunity to connect beyond the enslavement experience here in America.
Yeah. Good. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Our next question has to do with artificial intelligence, or AI. AI is one of the latest tools that is being utilized for genealogy research. Have you used it yet? What has been your experience?
So in my bread and butter, I'm a techie. So of course, AI is one of my bags. So AI is all the rage right now. I was at a conference, and that conference had talked all about AI. It has its good things and its bad things. Just remember, if you use AI, trust but verify, because it's pulling information from different places and giving you an answer. You have to use it in such a way, you have to talk to it as if it's a person to get the information that you want. I do use it in my genealogy. I use it to write stories. I use it to maybe create tables. I'll feed in people and tell it to, I may give it like names. I may give it the gender and age. And I'll say, create me a table of this, or group this in such a way in different things. So I play with it that way. But it's important to know, just because you ask AI a question and it spits out an answer, that you should not just take that AI information as your own. It's very important to ask it specific information and look at that information and massage it to what you're looking for. But it is a great tool. You can feed it maybe in Ancestry you have like the table of information. You can feed it that information and have it do whatever it is you want it to do. It can draw maps depending on which one you use. You can, one thing I'm trying to learn how to do is overlay current map over old maps, and there's a way in AI that you can do that using maybe ChatGPT or maybe the other Claude. I use that one too. So it's a new field. Well, it's really not really new, but it's new to us, and you can use it in just about any area of your life. But remember to trust but verify, and ask it specific information. Sometimes the question you ask it is pretty long. I will say something like, I'm a genealogist and I'm looking for this person in South Carolina. They lived on a farm, da 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 da. And it'll spit out some information for me that's coherent and gets me going in the direction I'm trying to go, and I'll take it from there. So I love AI. I'm still exploring it, and I think it helps in genealogy a lot.
I too love AI. I tend to call it my boyfriend. I can ask any question. I do get answers. Yeah. But what? Don't. But it is. Anytime anyone asks me, that's what I say, because I use it at work. I use it to analyze information. I have to do a report every day, and I ask it to give me the top 5 trends with the percentages. I don't like the answer, I go back and tell it to change it to what I need. So with genealogy, I find that, just as Tamu said, you can take information from a census, say, and you can put that information and ask AI to interpret it, or it may tell you something you didn't notice, right? You've been following the wrong person all these years, and it may show you, oops, you've made a really big mistake here. So just like anything, as Tamu alluded to, with genealogy, you can't trust what somebody gives you. Same thing if you get, what is that thing called, shaky leaf? Yeah, that thing. I don't use Ancestry. Um, but you'll find a tree or the shaky leaf thing will give you something. You can't take it and run with it because it could be wrong, right? So it could be the way you asked it. So when you work with AI, whichever one, I'm frugal, so everything I do is free. Um, you go back and forth, just like with ancestry, with family search, with heritage. You can get different responses for the way you ask. Same thing happens with AI. So, just play with it, but just know that what it gives back may not be right. So you need to double check.
I am just beginning to utilize AI because I've been reluctant. I've been concerned, as mentioned, whether or not what will come from it is trustworthy. So I've been sort of just, creeping along. But now, sitting and listening to Rhonda and Tamu, I'll probably consult them with what should be my next step because I'm still reluctant. I'm still grounded very much in the research of old and making, of course, the adjustment and utilizing digitization and DNA has confirmed some things for me. So the AI venture would be a further extension, but I'm cautious.
Um, I'm going to add something here. I've actually used AI similar to what everyone has said here, but I've also used it to create images. When I'm building a presentation, if I'm talking about a specific person, and I have an ancestor that the enslaver's family had written a book, and they described him. They said, "Old Uncle Godfrey. His feet were so big he had to make his own." So when I created this presentation, I used AI to create an image of this elderly, or about the age he would have been, man with large feet, African American, trying to talk it through how, because I don't have a picture of him, but how he may have looked based on some of my ancestors that I do know how they look. So that's one way that I've also been able to use it. So
I have a question with that.
yeah.
So with AI and constructing that type of imagery, the biases that goes into the construction of AI, how does it show up? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean,
It's part of, and I think that's a good question. But the way that you build prompts. So you say you want a medium complected or a dark complected, someone with a wider nose, someone with fuller lips, or smaller lips, someone with gray and black hair, or you kind of talk. You have the prompts that you give it, kind of tell it how you think you want it to show up, and then they usually give you different options, and you say that's the one I want. Oh no, none of these, all of these suck. Do it again. So you can play around with it. I understand your question, but it's you telling it specifically how tall do you think the person should be. Not only the feet should be big, but what's the proportion size? Is this a tall person? Is this a stocky person? Is this whatever? So you're building that.
so do you think there are racial exaggerations from the builders, the constructors of the platform?
I have not seen it. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I think if you are and it probably is, but if you are building the prompts, in my experience, if you are telling it specifically how you want those images to look, and I have been pretty successful in getting images that are not grotesque and weird looking, you know, because of those biases that you're asking about.
Okay.
Also, I think with ChatGPT, I think that's one of them. You can feed it images and have it spit out things that you want. And there is biases in AI because there's not enough of us represented in the field. So, like my son, he's in computer science. So I encourage him, you know, hey, why don't you look at AI, because we need more people like us to build it, to feed it the correct information and things like that. But the more, like as Tammy said, you have to give it kind of really good prompts to get what you're looking for, to spit out that information. Because sometimes it'll spit out an image and the person may have 6 fingers or something. So you have to really look at it, and you have to tell it to go back and say, hey, remove one of those fingers or something like that. So you have to be very, very specific with it. It's not something you just say, hey, what's the weather like? You use Google for that. When you want something specific, you have to write out. There's a person in AI that I follow. I forgot what she called it. Something like similar to Cat in the Hat, but she has a specific way that she builds her prompts. And save those prompts because you can build on those as well. But the prompt is the key. You have to be real specific. You can even tell it the tone, what kind of attitude, and all those kind of things, and it will give you that information.
Okay, great. So we're going to get to our final thoughts. I would like to get the panel's final thoughts on what they think genealogy would look like will look like for future researchers. Also, kind of part 2 of that same question, how can individuals ensure that our stories are preserved for the future in this anti-woke environment?
That's a good question. I think the future will be more digitization. I think the future also are in our young people. How do we get them involved? Do we start creating TikTok census records or something like that to get them involved in different things? How do we reach people like that? As far as the anti-woke, especially with this election that just happened, I'm pretty worried because they already don't want, some states are restricting access to records. So it's something to think about and to worry about. And then you have Internet Archive is getting hacked and everything, so you have to think about that kind of thing. But I think the future is still bright. But I think we need more people to get into genealogy, history, and keep it alive because it can be changed. I think it was J. Edgar Hoover. There's this story, I don't know if it's true, that he has African ancestry. So when he became FBI leader, he had some stuff in the census records change. So you have to, I don't know if this is true, but this is what I've heard. And but it can be done because if you had the FBI, you have access to that kind of thing. Your future president took records from, places and took it home. So we have to really watch that. We have to be on guard about that kind of thing. But I think, as with anything, take everything with a grain of salt. I like to go back to older books, older records for my information because I don't know what's been changed in the past 20 years. They're already trying to whitewash our history. So they may try to whitewash the census records or other records that's out there. So just be on guard and make sure that you watch that kind of thing and compare it, analyze things. But I do think if we get more people involved in wanting to know more about their family, the future will be bright.
Yes, I agree. I think greater accuracy in the future than now, but you still have to be attentive. You have to not just accept what's being presented, but to kind of pivot back to J. Edgar Hoover. There was a member of OGS who is a descendant, a J. Edgar Hoover descendant, Her name was Millie, or is Millie. What was Millie's last name, Tony? You recall? But she's in Arkansas. I think she may have moved to California. She actually wrote a book called What's Done in the Dark. There is also a DVD that you can purchase, What's Done in the Dark, regarding J. Edgar Hoover and that experience of actually knowing that he had a great uncle who was black, and the experience of removing that information from the census record, destroying his home, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a fascinating story if you just kind of want to follow up on that research.
I think what should happen is that everyone here and in the genealogy world should make sure that your stories, your research, your finds, even if it's related to you or not, because I do a lot of things that nothing to do with my family, a lot of interest here in Atlanta, that we should put it somewhere. So this is a great repository to put those stories if they will accept them. Put them someplace where someone can't just go to the internet and zip it and zap it and make it disappear. So we have to kind of go back to old, right? We can digitize and make it available for others, but we need paper, right? We have to have it on paper, because if it's on paper, then it's somewhere and it's in multiple places as opposed to one place. So I think that could help us. And then the last thing would be somehow or another, bring the kids along kicking and screaming if that's what we have to do, right? Because they have to understand. It's funny, they're not interested until you put them in an environment that then it becomes interesting. Family reunions, all of a sudden you're interested in where your family came from, but you didn't care last week. So, you have to introduce them to family, make it family activities. One little silly thing, like I said, I was the crazy in the family. One Thanksgiving, I decided we're going to play a game, and I annoyed them for 1 hour straight. Are we going to play the game? Are we going to play the game? Finally,
everyone has said, is to write your stories. And when I say write it, I don't necessarily mean to put it in a book, even though I think that would be good, but put it in blogs, put it in short stories, put it on the Facebook, just telling a story, but getting the family stories together. I think family reunions are an excellent place to, again, document information about your family. And sometimes it's just a little story. It's not like, it may not be a big story, maybe a little story, but having that information and making it available to anyone is also, is access, is making sure that the information is documented, and having it so that it's there for eternity. A couple of things in regards to some of the things that I want to say, give Tamika strong. A couple of years ago, she headed the digitizing funeral programs. And that's an excellent way. And
Yes.
you don't need, and they weren't necessarily just from Georgia. They could have been from wherever your family was. And it was a way for, you had to bring in the funeral program. It was digitized, and it's in a place that's being preserved.
It's right here.
Yeah. So those are the type of things that we need to make sure that we're continuing. We have to make sure that we're continuing to tell the story. And again, I was saying, the story doesn't have to be big. I was reminded of, my mother had told me this story about our aunt who was, I don't know how old she was. I think she was a teenager. She was about to get married. And they would have, they would call it wedding parties. And that's when they would go away for the weekend while they're about to get married. They would fix all the food, kill a hog or whatever the process was. And so, and my aunt, she said that the aunt was under supervision. And she asked to go to the outhouse, and they said, no, wait, somebody need to go with you. She said, I'll be okay. So they allowed her to go. My great aunt, no, actually, it must have been my great great aunt, she eloped and married someone else. when she went to the bathroom. And so I thought that was hilarious. I said, are you sure this is the story my mother is telling me? Because my mother just thought it was hilarious. I said, what? Well, what did they, I'm at, what they do with the hall, you know? What they do? But anyway, so years later, I did find that she did get married. I think she was like 16 years old. She married this man who was like 27 years old. The marriage didn't last, but it was just really funny. And this was an aunt. She lived until her 90s, and she was a little feisty woman, even in her 80s and 90s. So I can just imagine her, escape. But I'm just saying, those are stories that, you're bringing levity to your family, just to give some a little fun, but it's also information about your family. And if you don't tell the story, it'll be lost.
Right.
So I'm finished with all my questions. Do you guys have any questions? And if so, we do have some time for questions. Anybody have questions? Here, there's a microphone just to make sure everyone.
Introduce yourself.
We
You
not
gotta
gonna play
introduce
that.
yourself.
What I gotta say?
Say your name first.
Oh, okay. My name is Janice Sykes. Hey, everybody.
Hey.
And Mr. Stephenson.
Yes, ma'am.
He is part of the original crew. Those of us who started family history, I prefer calling it, in the library system. We were on the 5th floor of the downtown library creating what we have here now. And this is my sister who's in charge now. Yes, I happen to have been a genealogist and all of that, but it was people like Mr. Stephenson and my Rhonda, who's also my Girl Scout Go lady. We created family history, and we steered away from the word genealogy. And the reason why we steered away from it, because at that time there were not all these wonderful platforms we have now. So we want everybody to feel like they have a family history, and everybody really does. And it's probably already been covered, but the agricultural records, let's not miss those. That's another long story, but we're glad everyone is here, and everything that you need, you can get it from them.
That gentleman had his hand up too.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Oregon, out of Arkansas, at a math conference for lots of ways, but you know how we genealogists do, we kind of mix it up when we talk. So I really appreciate this library for having this particular workshop during this particular week. My question is, for each of you, I just want one response from each of you. What would you say is the best resource that you found to help you find your enslaved ancestors?
You're first.
For me, it's the internet. FamilySearch.org, Ancestry, those are gold mines because you think you can't find your enslaved, and everybody talk about that 1870 brick wall. I've learned over the years that's pretty much a myth in some cases. You can go beyond that 1870 brick wall. So I would say the internet has helped me tremendously.
For me, it's been knowing where my descendants are buried and visiting the cemeteries, which I do often, to both clean off the graves and to, in most instances here in Georgia, as well as my research in Virginia and North Carolina, those cemeteries are usually augmented by very small churches that have records. So utilizing that, for me, has been the best.
Okay, for me, my resource is Family Search. My ancestors are from the Caribbean, so in terms of the enslaver, I'm not there yet because my challenges are it's not so easy to identify because race is not part of a lot of the records. So, and names are very common. So I'm still working on that.
So we had a question.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. Has been very good for me. I've done some genealogy in the past, and I hadn't done a lot in a while, but I'm going to jump back into it and start digging. The issue that I had the most was with the 1890 census not being available. How do you get past that? Because I have that 20-year gap there between 1880 and 1900 that I just can't. There's a lot of people that just vanish in that space, and I'm wondering if you've been able to overcome that or how you do that. Thank you.
Okay, one thing that I would say is if you had any family that was in the war, the Civil War, the 1890, there actually is a census for veterans. So that's one thing to do. Another thing would be to look at local censuses for if there is a state census that may have occurred during that time. And then the other thing I would say would be like vital records that may. Now, 1890 is pretty early, and a lot of vital records did not exist, but there were some. So you can look for vital records such as birth records, marriage records, a lot of marriage records. That can, and church records. That's the other thing that I would say. So even though you may not have the U.S. Census for 1890, again, you have the Veterans Schedule for 1890. You have local censuses that may have occurred, tax records also. That again, you can kind of see what your family may have been doing, and those records do exist.
City directories as well
Yeah.
are helpful that I found. Newspapers, if you know where your ancestor was between those 20 years, that's helpful as well.
Church records.
And I would say something odd, use the slave narratives, because although it's talking about slavery, sometimes in an interview they talked about other things that were more recent, so it didn't necessarily have to be just about slavery. So you may find something, and don't look just for your relative, just look in the area that you're researching and just see what you may find.
One more thing. Sir, which states are you researching?
Louisiana mostly,
There you go.
and some Texas, West Texas, Infield.
Okay.
My father's family from, but my mother's family is all from North Louisiana, Arcadia, and all that area. Bienville Parish. And so I do the same thing with the cemeteries. I've walked the cemeteries and
Yes.
gotten a lot of names. I can go back to the 1820 birthwise, but that's about as far as I can go. But there's a little space that I can't quite have.
Yeah.
This is some good options I hadn't thought about.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. Also, the new International African American Museum in Charleston has a genealogy center too, and they do it by state too. I want to ask you all about what's the best DNA service, or maybe even most ethical DNA service. I know they are all now they're businesses, so some of them are selling their information. So I'm just interested in that. And my other question is really about kind of the future of genealogy too. I'm also interested in my family's migration patterns. Have you all done anything with not just finding your families, but also like mapping their migration patterns, and if there's any interesting things y'all finding out about that?
So the first question about AI. So I've tested with Ancestry, of course, 23andMe, and Family Tree DNA, and all three I've tested with, because not everybody tests with Ancestry, not everybody tests with 23andMe, and so on and so forth. So I kind of spread the wealth a little bit. Of course, 23andMe is in a little trouble right now. I don't know if they're going to be around, but I did opt every time I tested to throw away my DNA. Don't store it. But you don't know what they're doing with it. I just have to I'm using it for my personal gain. If they want to use my DNA for something, if it's going to be helpful, then use it. I don't care. But I'm using it for my personal gain to find my family. So to me, it doesn't matter. As far as migration patterns, that's very important when researching your family. You have to know where they were, how did they get to where they came from. So on one of my branches, in the late 1700s, their enslavers were originally from Maryland, and then they ended up in South Carolina, and then they ended up in my hometown of Columbus, Georgia, and then some of them ended up in where I say my roots are from, in Stewart County, Georgia. Of course, doing research, my roots are everywhere right now, but you have to trace. It's very important, especially when you go beyond 1870, to see where these people came from. Then you have to start researching what I call the white folks and see where they came from, and figure out what kind of records may have been left from that traveling.
Good morning. My name is Nate Mathis, and the reason why I'm here is because I have every intention of engaging my children on their heritage, their family, their roots. Fortunately, most of what I know about our roots are right here in Georgia, although I grew up elsewhere. But I do have a question. I know that there are some Native Americans in my family tree. Have you all crossed paths with any records for Native Americans in this country, particularly in the southeastern United States? And I'd like to know what experiences you may have had or making use or finding those kinds of records.
I haven't crossed paths with any of the records, but I'm aware of several persons who have. There's a gentleman who is the president of a chapter of OGS in North Carolina. His name is Lamar Deloach, and he's done extensive research on so-called Native American or indigenous folks and in their relationship to black people. So that might be an option for you to begin. What was her name who wrote the book? Yeah, Raji.
Angie Raji. The other thing I was going to say is that Maggie, the Midwestern African American Genealogy Institute, they actually, one of the tracks is that of doing native research. So one of the tracks is there, and I think Angela Watson Raji is the coordinator for that track. She also has several books on the subject, and the other person I would say would be Nika Smith. Nika is I think she is Cherokee. I think she's Cherokee, and she also has done a number of research. So though Nika Sewell Smith and Angela Watson Raji would be like who I would say are the experts, and then Maggie has a actual track that talks about the different records specifically for those who may have been enslaved by the five civilized tribes.
So-called.
May
So-called.
may I ask you a question? Have you done your DNA?
Not yet.
Okay, so what I might recommend,
With Mr. Stephenson now. Okay. I'm getting over it in part because, I'm up there in years, it's not gonna be too much they can do.
okay,
I'm realizing that, I think there's more to gain than to lose, so
Yes,
okay.
I'm turning the corner on a lot of this.
yes.
So what I might recommend to you, you might want to do your DNA first before you do the other stuff. Just to see what your admixture is first, is the way I'll put it.
Yeah, I used to think I was a Cherokee princess.
Well, tell them.
Hello.
I'm sorry.
uh,
Oh, go ahead. Oh, I was just gonna say, I was commenting to her. I used to think I was a Cherokee princess. I have no Native. I have like a 1%, less than 1% Native American. So I am not that Cherokee princess. So make sure you try that DNA. Yeah. And yeah, try that. Because I was doing some research for a friend who claimed her grandmother was Blackfoot Indian in Mississippi. Well, there's no Blackfoot Indian in Mississippi, first of all, and sometimes you can't go by looks. So the DNA does help in that regard as well.
Hi, my question is for Tammy. You just talked about kind of figuring out a way to group everything, maybe write it down some kind of way. My family has a large, huge Facebook group because my great grandmother was one of 14. So basically what we did was each grouping of the family, each child has told the story of that particular person, and then those people and those people and those people. What would you say is a suggestion of trying to compile all of that or document it so that way, like Rhonda said, it's not lost when somebody gets mad and deletes the internet tomorrow?
I would actually say try to publish it. And not necessarily for profit, but to just have it in a very nice way that you can share it with other people in the family. If 14 different lines have 14 different stories, and if you can also add to it, make sure that you have vital records, census records, death certificates, marriage licenses. If you have the stories and you have additional documents such as the vital records to support it, then that is, you're telling your family's story. And that book that you've compiled cannot be destroyed. No one can ever take it away because you have the supporting documents to say this is my family. That would be the thing. The other thing, what I've done, I've actually I've done everything through a blog, and through my blog, I actually do very specific posts where I tell a story. I have the vital records. I try to name as many of the children as was part of the union, and I, have the supporting documents, the censuses, death certificates, birth certificates if they're available, baptismal records, and I just try to include that so that, someone contacted me last night. He read a story that I wrote 5 years ago. Come to find out, this guy is a DNA relative. I didn't know him, but he had read the story years ago. I think I need to correct something that he has, but he's a cousin. I looked him up, and he had written me, and it was because he had saw my blog. And is this a way to keep that information available?
So I'm sorry, I'll just add my 2 cents. So since you have those stories, those profiles, I would go ahead and make copies of them now. Because like you said, somebody could get mad and they wanna start deleting stuff. But I will use that as my basis. But like Tammy said, I will use that as a foundation and build upon it and add the documents, the census records, vital records, whatever information you can get. But then Look at family genealogies that have already been published, just to kind of get some ideas, because there's certain numbering schemes that they have out there, and just to get inspired, like we have the family genealogies here, the Georgia Archives, CS 71 has a ton of them. So just look at some existing family genealogies so that you can start working to the county board.
You know, as the family junior historian, depending on, not even so much depending on, but once your family has a family reunion, it's important to have a document. It doesn't have to be too comprehensive of all 700 or more. But something like this. I recently had a family reunion in Sparta, Georgia. Sparta, Georgia is primarily a black town in Hancock County, and there's one library. And there was very little of the family information in that library, though that my family on my mother's side, on my maternal side, had been there for 200 years. So doing a family booklet, I donated to the library. And it is just a tremendous resource because many of the names, for example, on this tree, they don't know one another. They have no idea. A little story here, a little story there. But having something there to connect, hopefully in the future, this will be utilized by the library. So that's just an idea.
So one more plug, I'm sorry. So Auburn Avenue is y'all library. We have an international collecting policy. Like I said, one of the things we're trying to do is to build our family history collection. So just like Baba Jean just talked about the family reunion booklets, we accept those as donations as well. So yeah, you guys will hear more. Make sure you get on our mailing list because we are really going to work hard to build those collections. And so also consider joining Oz, because Oz is one of our partners, whether they know it or not. But we're going to continue working to build these collections because we already have funeral program collection that we're building because we're about to digitize the second batch. But we're still trying to build those collections because we know we need a foundation as well. So that's what we're working hard to do. And so now that I'm here, I get to spend a lot of time doing that and working closely with Derek. So just a plug. Yes, ma'am.
Hey. Hello. How do we find information about our ancestors before they were slaves? Is there a way to do that?
Well, first you have to kind of start with what you know. You start with yourself, and you have to work backwards. So you're not gonna find them right away. You have to do the research. For me, it started with a 4th grade family research project. I'm not gonna tell my age, but it's been a while, and I'm still researching. All right, so you can't just jump to Africa and find your person. You got to do the work. You got to start with you, start with your parents, and keep going back and back and back. And it takes a while. Just because we research all the time does not mean that I have not found my African ancestor. So I don't worry about that right now because I still got to get past the 1800s and then figure out when did they come to this place. And then from there, how did they come to this place and what was their name before they changed it? So there's a lot of variables that you're not going to be able to just go straight to Africa and find your person. So it's not a lot of people have done it.
Let me just add to that and really kind of just emphasize what you said. You don't start in Africa. You have to start from today and you move systematically backward. you know, and I think that that's because it's a challenge just to do it that way. So if you try to jump generations, then you're going to really be frustrated. So the way is to be systematic. Now you can get some clues. DNA can give you clues, right? They can tell you what your ethnic makeup is, where part of your family may have been from. But if you want to kind of get back to that ship, then you have to be systematic and don't jump to the ship. Make sure you understand you're working backwards systematically.
This gentleman had a question. Okay.
I just wanted, good morning. I just wanted to make a comment in regards to doing research and what has come out now that can kind of push you forward a little bit or help you when it comes to jumping over that brick wall. And it is the ability to do full text search on Family Search. That is a brand new experiment that they have just put out. And it allows you to actually either put in the name in the keyword box or in the name box and then the location. And then, you know, you can choose some dates that you think, you know, are arranged where you're you know, for the records that you're looking for. But it does bring up the documents that are digitized, and it'll be deeds, it'll be wills, mortgages, you know, crop liens, whatever, you know, wherever that name pulls up. And that has helped me a lot doing research because that's what I do all day long, every day. When it comes to looking for your enslaver, your family's enslaver, okay? It helps out a lot because you now have an automatic and an instant visual to kind of search, to kind of look at, instead of doing it the old, you know, the regular way by, you know, just doing our regular searches. The full text search really, really helps a lot because it digs into the documents immediately. It recognizes handwriting and characters, and so there's just you know, it has been very, very helpful right now, and with the work that I do, with latching on to enslavers or documents that your enslaved family, you know, show up in. And I just wanted to put that out there because a lot of people are not using it yet, but it is there and it is extremely helpful.
To add to that, the Family Search is free. We pay for Ancestry, we pay for MyHeritage, 23andMe, etc. Family Search is probably, I'm not certain what their database capacity is, but Family Search can provide you with as much, if not more than, these other platforms that we're paying for. So familysearch.com, shameless plug.
I want to add to what Akosawa said, because I think that is really a game changer. But I think you still have to make sure that you're doing the work, because to utilize that tool in familysearch.org, you still have to know, you have to make sure you're in the right location. You have to make sure that you have an idea of who the enslaver might be. So you still have to have done your other work, like who were the landholders on the 1870, 1860 censuses, so you can get an idea of where your family may have been. You also have to make sure that you're doing the collateral research. Who were the siblings? Who were the you know, other family members? So to make sure that you have the right person, that you're looking for the right group of people when you're doing that research. But it is definitely a game changer, as you said.
This gentleman has been asked. Okay.
Hello, everyone. Again, great panel presentation. My name is Adolphus Armstrong, and I'm a member of the local Atlanta AUGS chapter. But I just had a quick comment. For those of you who are considering doing DNA, at least from my research, it's absolutely critical that you do the DNA. And keep in mind, most of the tests, specifically with 23andMe and Ancestry, those are autosomal tests that typically when you test, that gets you about 240 years back in the past. So if you are a senior and if you have a parent, you want to get your parents tested first. And if you can't get your parents tested, and if you have siblings or first cousins, try and get all of them to test if they will be willing to do it. Keep in mind right now, the tests are $39, I think, in Ancestry. That's the sale that they're having now. And it will be an absolute game changer. Once you get your DNA results back, it will literally show you the migration pattern of what trafficking looks like once you start to discover relatives in Arkansas, California, Texas, who have no clue based on where your family happens to be. So if you have not considered doing the DNA testing, so whenever I have a senior who tests, when they pass away, and if I have not had a chance to get to them or their sibling, I literally consider that a library that's burned that we can't get to. So there's so much locked into your DNA. So if you have not tested, make sure that you do test, and to keep in mind, Ancestry is the largest database. So if you're really trying to find your African-American connections, by default, you almost have to be in Ancestry. And keep in mind, that is an autosomal test, which you can take that test and upload it for free to myheritage.com and also for Family Tree DNA. So there are tons of videos out there on it, but you can't be in the game if you do not have a test. So please, please, please test and find your people.
You need to head up our DNA SIG. I'll talk to you after this.
Thank. Hey, I want to thank the panelists today and want to give a shout out to our Ebenezer member, Rhonda. How do we go about doing this in this technology, with the technology we have? We have too many missing dates. If we don't complete the dates on documents, it's hard to really complete the kind of research we're trying to do. So how do we teach our young people and even our older seniors as they are writing their obituaries, as they're writing their funeral programs, and they purposefully leave out dates? How can we as a community tell our community it's okay to let people know when you were born and when you died or when you made your transition to the ancestors? We find ourselves in the archives now looking back and reading back, trying to figure out when did this happen. So as we talk today about finding our history, finding ourselves, you can't do that if dates are missing. I've tried to find my mother who grew up in Blakely, Georgia, and some of her records are missing because the dates were just not put there. But I'd like to hear from this panel, how do we deal with making ourselves accountable for writing down the information, starting with the full date, month, date, and year?
I think it's, truthfully, when we do things, we just don't think about the future. We just are in the present. So I can go back to things in my research, and I can't even tell you when I did it because the simple thing of writing down the date on it wasn't on my mind at that date. It was, I found this and I'm so happy, and now I need to go back and find it. Don't remember where I found it, you know. So I think it's something that we have to train ourselves to do in terms of what has happened and trying to make someone who is a senior remember what happened. You may need to go and find something around that time to kind of boost them to remember, oh, I was 16 when that happened. So then that will help you establish a year, right? It may not be the date, but the year may be helpful. And from there, you can jump off and maybe find a newspaper article that can give you that specific date that you're trying to obtain.
One of the things that I like to do is timelines. Timelines are a valuable tool. And so you may not know the exact date, but utilizing tools like the census records, marriage records, estimated birth dates, and things like that, you can actually build a timeline backwards in time. So you may not have the full dates, but you can look at the records and get the clues in terms of ages. Like when you're looking at the census record, we talked about migration. Where were the children born? That kind of gives you an idea about their migratory path as well. So utilize timelines. One easy way to do a timeline is what I call a census checklist. So say, for instance, if a person was born in 1928 and they died in 1960, what census records show up in between that time frame? So that is the beginning of your timeline. So 1930, 1940, 1950. And if the person was a male, what document did they have to have? One of the draft cards. Were they old enough to have World War I? Were they old enough to have World War II? What about marriage? What about the ages of the children? What about the dates that they were born? So there's a way to build a timeline for an individual just with a few bits of information. I was telling somebody the other day, give me a funeral program. That's a great starting point. Now we know we got to take everything in a funeral program with a grain of salt, because some people include information, they exclude information. They add some stuff that ain't supposed to be there, but it's a great foundation tool. So like the panelist said, trust and verify. Use all the tools that you have in your toolbox, but also trust and verify. So
some of the other simple tools would be with the parent going to school records. Where did the parent work? I mean, you know, it's the real simple things that will give you real good clues. Medical records, you know, was she ever sick? When you were sick, where did you go to the doctor, the hospital, etc.? It's those kinds of things, because in the archives I'm not certain about doctor records, but I know with hospital records, some vital records are in archives. So you just have to, just like Tammy was saying, you have to do the work.
And also think about newspapers. So location and date are two important factors, but newspapers are the social media of their time.
Yes.
She gave me the mic, but she wanted
Well, hey, I just love genealogy, and well, you know, I get passionate, so I can't keep my mouth closed, so my apologies. But newspapers, during their time, they were the social media. So you can get everybody's business from the newspaper. Like in Macon, the Macon Telegraph, it told you who went into the hospital, who came out the hospital. So newspapers, you know, learn the dates, learn what newspapers are available during that time. Check newspapers.com, Chronicling America, the Georgia Newspaper Project, depending upon your location. But think about newspapers, okay? I promise you got the question.
Well, you know, they say you save the best for last, I guess. Now, after listening to everything, first thank you, panel, and my wife for bringing me, and everyone else and all your questions that you brought out. The reason I wanted to say something is because I'm not a researcher. However, I am in college. I went back to school, and I got a 4.0 right now.
All right.
Yeah, in human services. But listen, out of everything you all spoke about, my wife had to dispel my family's tree that we all thought my mother's mother had Indian, and she had to go and dig it up and prove the family wrong. We're mad about that. But on the serious tip, I'm supposed to be at home getting ready to watch Ohio State play, and she brought me here. I didn't hear anybody address this issue, and so I wanted to bring it out because she taught me this, watching her in her office for hours and hours and hours. When I want to be with my wife, she's in there DNAing. Okay. There was points when she brought out that she spent hours to get past a bridge, where when the census people would come to the homes back then and ask who's in the home, you may have Lynette, and they say, "Oh, Nettie," back there, and they get the wrong name. So it's not recorded as Lynette; it's recorded as Nettie. So now you've lost that contact. So you get some nieces, and we got all our nicknames. So how many of those nicknames have thrown you off of your chase? How do you what tricks do you have to overcome that obstacle?
All right now.
So one of the ways that you can research name changes, because they do happen, and it depends on when the enumerator knocked, who was home. I tried it in 2010, and Lord, time you got back there the fourth time and no one was home, you really wanted to speak to anyone. So then they could. So they can go next door and ask Tammy who lives next door. And she says Henry, although his name is Hank. So what you have to do is you have to follow clusters, like Tammy said. So you have to follow. So Hank one year, Henry the next, but Sarah is consistent with John and Sally. So then you're realizing, and the ages are bumping the 10 years. So you realize this is the family, but the name keeps changing. And it could be spelling. My brother-in-law's last name now is Glaspie. From everything that I figured out for him, it started as Gillespie. So they kept adding letters, taking away letters, putting it, rearranging them, but it's still the same family. So you just have to look at the cluster.
She's the researcher. I just be listening.
Well, now you can help her.
No, I got my schoolwork.
So that's my tip.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what you need to do. Who are you have to follow families, and you have to document all of those different changes. Like if it's Henry and Hank, one year it may go back from Henry to Hank and then Henry again. So you have to document that information. But you're following the families, and that's why it's important, because you may also have similar names. You may have, in my family, there's a Francois Frank. There's several of them, and we always get them messed up. So we have to look at the wife. We have to look at the children to make sure we're following the same person, looking at the different censuses.
So we
have about 5 more minutes.
Yeah, we got time enough for about 2 more questions.
Mine's short. So I'm just curious, how are you storing your family history? Software, online trees, notebooks?
All of them. I use Family Tree Maker. I use my Ancestry. I have my own little folders on my computer. I have stuff in the cloud. I have stuff on I have it everywhere. I have notebooks, old notebooks from when I first started. I even went out and bought the cute little binders. I don't even know why I bought them, because I can't even organize that stuff right now. But I use them. I use everything, and sometimes it's duplicated information. But I have stuff everywhere, and one day I'm gonna get to the point where I'm gonna organize it. But I know where it is. but that's what I use. I don't keep stuff. Even though I use Ancestry, Family Tree Maker can bring it down to my computer, so it even brings down all the images of the census records that I've looked at. So those things are stored on my computer. So I love Family Tree Maker, but there's others out there. But that's a good tool to use as well. Mm-hmm.
Well, that was one of my questions. And, on that note, what if that stuff disappears? I do Family Tree, Ancestry. I do Ancestry and 23andMe. Just got into Family Tree, or the one with the Mormons made. So, which I think I'm finding a whole lot more stuff on there that I ever found on Ancestry. But at least 23andMe makes you a tree. I had a wild experience with my ancestry because I didn't know anything about my family and learned a whole lot. Even some things like where my mama was a Hart, her daddy was a Hart, but when family tree took me to a way another name. So, and my other thing, I was curious about genealogy. I guess, how do you become a professional genealogist? How do you do that? That's what I want to know. I've been looking at a lot of like videos, really just started. But I did have researched all sides of my family and still doing so. And it's a journey, it's an emotional journey. But I was just wondering about becoming a professional genealogist. How do you do that? And mainly, how do you organize it? And that is, because I got a lot of paper. I have a book. We made a book it's a small book, so we can donate it. But it needs, I want to update it. So, you can, that's something I learned coming here. So that makes a lot of sense. But organization, because it's just not organized. And those were my two questions.
So to get started, I'm not a professional genealogist. You can become a certified genealogist and you can start charging people whatever. And sometimes I'm like, I'm gonna become a certified genealogist. I just don't have the time right now. But you can start with what you're doing right now. You don't have to be a professional genealogist. Just by the fact that you're researching your family, you're a genealogist. You may be beginner, intermediate, or advanced. You're a genealogist. You're doing the research. So you don't have to become a professional. But there are organizations, it escapes me. I just know the BCG, AP Gen. Yeah, board certified genealogist. That's the main one. AP, is it AP Gen? Yeah. And join genealogical societies like OGS. Join Georgia Genealogical Society. Join National Genealogists. Join those organizations. Go to the conferences, and that way you learn more. You get to expand your research capability. I'm still learning. I've been doing this a long time, but I learn something new all the time. I learn something new from these people here. I don't know everything. Sometimes I go back and I do a refresh. Like right now, I'm refreshing my research and starting over because I'm real bad about citing my work. So now that's my project, to go back and cite my sources and make sure I have so I don't have to keep going back trying to find stuff. I know exactly where it was. I know when I did it. So you never stop learning. You don't have to be a professional. You're a professional already. You're already doing it. You got a book? I haven't even got my book out yet. I got 3 books I'm starting. I haven't even finished them. So, so you don't. That's how you start. You start with self, and you just start doing the research. Mm-hmm. For your mental health, you keep going. That's just one person. If I had stopped when I was looking for my grandfather's father, I would have never gained a whole branch of my family. 20 years ago, like I said, this man changed his name. So up until 1930, he was one person, and I knew him as someone else. But I was able to connect my family, and to this day, I have a whole new family. And if one person said, "Oh, you should stop trying to find this person," you never find them, and I just stopped. Who knows? But you have to let that person be and keep going. You can't stop.
What is his name? There's a author. His name is Tony Burrows. We were at a seminar in South Carolina, and someone stood up and said the reason we all were there was because we were selected by our ancestors to tell the story. So if the other part don't want it, that's all right. Your assignment is to do what you've been asked to do. And then maybe that person doesn't want it, but their descendants may. So, it's okay. You'll find that resistance, but you keep going, and then, leave little tidbits around, and you'd be surprised how people then get attracted to the stories or the history, and they'll come around.
There are bones in closets. So, but as a researcher and a family historian, to me that's just too bad. It's fact, and I research it and I document it. And if someone wants to challenge me on it, I'm like, bring it, because this is what happened. This is what I found, and I'm not going to change it. We can't change it. This is what it is. You know.
So we want to say thank you for thank you to our panel.
Before we leave, I want to before you clap, I want to offer a shameless plug for the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society Incorporated, of which all four of us are members, and there are a couple folks as well in the audience, including Tamika. Now, one of the aspects of this national organization, aside from the fact that each year there is a national conference, this year there was a national conference last month, and it primarily was virtual. The theme was Fighting Erasure, Staying Visible by Keeping African American Genealogy and History in Focus. So this is the quarterly newsletter that the organization issues. Aside from the newsletter, each year there is a large publication of the presenters, upwards to 80, 90 presenters over a 3 or 4 day period, covering just about every imaginable subject. This would be extremely important to you as a member. I'm not plugging it for as membership, but as a member, as a research tool, how not to do your research. As a member, free. You can't beat it for $35 a year. You just cannot beat it. So I just wanted to make certain, I can't forget, there's also a biannual journal, which is here in the library. So this is something that you have to have, aside from utilizing digitization or DNA. You have to read, you have to have something in your hand of value. Just reading, that's fine, but when you have a collection of documents that as you get older, these documents become invaluable to your children, other relatives in the family reunions, your local institutions, the libraries, etc. Because at some point you may decide to, if the family doesn't want it, you want to donate them to the local library, such as AARL. So I just want to bring that to your attention. So if you're considering membership in an organization, consider OGS. You can rush to Ancestry, you can rush to 23andMe, but you also have Family Search. You have something that's free, that is there 24 hours for you. Work, home, you know, you just have all kinds of tools at your disposal. So you don't have to rush out and spend a whole lot of money trying to get something. There are those free resources. So I suggest you come back to AARL at some point and begin your research if you, or continue your research, or augment your research. That's it. Thank you.
So that's it. So thank you, panel. Thank you guys so very much. We truly, truly appreciate the knowledge you shared today.